These also don't have to be significantly good races. These can be significantly bad races, as you will find out in episode 2. Howdy, folks. It's Tommy Cook. We are back for another edition of the Retro Racing Roundup here on Turn 200. First of all, thank you all so much for your kind words and your positive feedback on the very first edition of the Retro Racing Roundup. We are back for round 2 here. Complete opposite end of the quality spectrum, though. We're jumping straight into the much maligned, not the much beloved, the much maligned Allstate 400 at the Brickyard from 2008. This is the crown jewel in what I guess you could refer to as the good year, bad year. July 27th, 2008. It is a sunny, warm Sunday afternoon in Speedway, Indiana, west of downtown Indianapolis, home to the world's most famous oval track. You'll notice it's a big rectangle. That doesn't make it very ovular, but oh well. God damn, look at this place. It is sold to capacity. 250,000 plus strong. 250,000 people to watch a NASCAR race. That is unbelievable. And it is still, according to NASCAR, one of the big four of the season. Yes, their major, their crown jewel, whatever you want to call it. Yes, that is the Brickyard 400. No amount of revisionist history is going to change that. NASCAR themselves say it is one of their big four. It pays out the biggest top to bottom purse of the entire season, including the Daytona 500. So it is a crown jewel event, no matter what you will say. We start the broadcast on ESPN in stunning 480p standard definition with our fearless leader, our hero, Alan Bestwick, doing a grid walk and absolutely slaying, as the kids say. And what the hell? Why on earth is he anchoring the pre-race show? Listen. Absolutely no disrespect to Dr. Jerry Punch. He is fantastic. He does the lap-by-lap commentary for ESPN in the 2008 season. But unless Alan Bestwick, unless the man AB himself requested to be on the pre-race panel, it makes no sense why not only ESPN, but also NBC did this to him for a while, too. And Doc Punch, I mean, he's good in the booth. Don't get me wrong. He is certainly listenable, and he's entertaining. He has good chemistry with Andy Petrie and Dale Jarrett. But you're leaving Alan Bestwick out of the booth. And you're leaving Doc Punch out of his wheelhouse, which is being a beat reporter and a pit reporter, garage reporter, whatever you want to call him. I mean, that is where he really thrives as well. So it just doesn't make any sense. Help me make it make sense, please. But enough complaining, because no matter who should be where and where they aren't and whatever, this ESPN team is absolutely juiced to the gills. They are absolutely gassed with talent. The pre-race panel alone, of course, Alan Bestwick being there is already a home run. But then you got the Grand Slam lineup after that, because you've got future Hall of Famer Rusty Wallace, the driver, in there. You've got future Hall of Fame crew chief and then still car owner Ray Evernham in there. And then sitting next to Ray Evernham, you've got another current and also then car owner, Brad Doherty. So you've got a driver, a crew chief, and a car owner, all three sitting next to Alan Bestwick. I mean, that is a great pre-race panel. But then also working the pits, you've got Jamie Little, Shannon Spake, Mike Massaro, and Dave Burns. Those are four fantastic pit reporters. And when we get to the booth later, you're going to have Dale Jarrett and Andy Petrie, who have great chemistry with no matter who they are working with up in the booth. So, I mean, what a lineup ESPN brought straight out of the gate here. So everybody knows the big lead-in story here for the 2008 Allstate 400 at the Brickyard is, of course, Kyle Busch. Yeah, I faked you out there, didn't I? Kyle, in his first year in the 18 car for Joe Gibbs at this point, he is on an absolute tear. They mentioned on the broadcast that we are in the midst of the summer of Kyle. And I always used to think that the summer stretch for NASCAR really began when TNT took over the broadcasting. Remember how Fox would get off a little bit earlier than they do now? They would give TNT the summer, and then they would give the third broadcaster, usually ESPN at this point, the rest of the season towards the chase. So TNT had the summer stretch. That is really when Kyle turned it on big time. He won 3 of the 7 TNT races, including the last 2 races in a row before ESPN took over heading into this year's running of the Brickyard 400. They show the stat bar in the interview that says he's won 15 races, and I'm like, what the hell? I don't remember anybody in the modern era winning 15 races in a season, but they're counting the Nationwide Series and the Truck Series in that statistic as well. He didn't just drop a 15 bomb mid-season. He didn't win all but 5 races heading into this race. That would be insane. Kyle actually won the previous day's race at IRP in the Nationwide Series. That is one of those 15 wins. 7 of those 15 wins have come in the Cup Series. So Kyle Busch, far and away the points leader, as we'll see here momentarily, heading into what is the 20th race of the season. At the very tail end of this interview, Kyle Busch just casually slips something in there about some tire issues that have been popping up here and there throughout the weekend. And yes, that is the actual big story here. It took almost just a tick under 7 minutes for them to bring up what is going to absolutely dominate this race, which is the fact that there have been some massive concerns about tires through practice and qualifying. Mainly the fact that not even one single person has made it more than 11 laps on a set of tires, mainly the right side tires, without having some tire blowouts or some massive cording issues on the tires. Alan and the gang begin to cover the issue on the pre-race show, but they don't really do it at length. So that means that with the additional benefit of about 15 years of hindsight, that I get to sort of fill in the gaps about what is actually going on here. In 2004, IMS has decided it is time to repave the track. It's time to do it. Instead of going the traditional route, though, they use this process called diamond grinding. All right. So it's where very, very teeny tiny small grooves are cut into the track surface. And why? Why? Well, this helps with the weathering of the track. Most people should know Indiana has some wild weather swings from season to season. This also helps make sure that the track surface is even and smooth everywhere, all around the track upon completion. It also helps drain rain a little bit quicker in the event that the skies decide to open up during the race. On race days, it would also help provide some additional grip at the beginning of runs. On the cost coming on the back end of the runs, however, as the grooves would wear the tires down a lot more. In 2005, the first year after the repave, both the Indianapolis 500 and the Brickyard 400 go off without a hitch at IMS. But they weren't the only 2 shows in town, you may recall. And I know some of you know exactly where this is going. Don't worry, I'm going to keep it brief. Yes, Formula One raced at Indianapolis at this time, from 2000 to, I believe, 2007. They put on 7 Grand Prix there. The 2005 United States Grand Prix was, to put it mildly, a shit show. There are bigger and better channels that have beat this horse to death, so I'm not going to join the ranks here. I will keep it very brief. In F1 in 2005, there's a tire war going on between Michelin and Firestone. Firestone's sister company, Bridgestone, provide the tires for the Indianapolis 500, so they have a ton of data ready to make the right tire compound for this race, since for some godforsaken reason, it's illegal to change tires in Formula One in 2005. And no, that is not a joke. You are not allowed to change tires during the race in F1 in 2005. Michelin, of course, not providing the tires for any racing at Indianapolis up to this point. They don't have any such data to go off of, and they completely missed the mark. They injured poor Ralf Schumacher in what is Speedway Turn 1 going backwards to the front straightaway, what is the final turn of the road course. Michelin provides the tires for all but 6 of the cars on the grid. So when the FIA will not budge on making some sort of compromise or solution that would actually benefit Firestone tire users and compromise the Michelin drivers, just as long as they would get to race in the race. The FIA says no to everything that Michelin proposes, so that all of the Michelin teams, at the behest of Michelin, agree to stage a walkout without any public announcement or acknowledgement or anything. So all but 6 cars don't take to the grid. You just have 6 cars lining up for the green flag, and then immediately 250,000 ravenous fans immediately start a small but very calculated and organized riot at the ticket offices while 6 cars putter around Indianapolis to do a full-length Formula One race. All right, so that wasn't Goodyear's problem. Goodyear hit the mark in 2005 at the Brickyard 400. So what's different? Well, first of all, this wasn't their first diamond grinding rodeo, if you will. It wasn't even their first diamond grinding rodeo in 2005. Indianapolis wasn't the only track to use diamond grinding in a repave. Lowe's Motor Speedway also used diamond grinding on their 2004 to 2005 repave of the track, and it would see only a few tire failures. And by a few, I mean it would set the NASCAR record for cautions in a race, 22 cautions in the 2005 Coca-Cola 600. And just, it's the Coca-Cola 600, so it's run on the same day as the Indianapolis 500 for IndyCar. IndyCar did not have any problems with the tire ground surface in 2005, but on that same day, NASCAR sets a caution record with 22 cautions because of diamond grinding at Charlotte. So Goodyear completely missed the mark there, complete failure on their part, but they sort of keep it together. They get it together for Indianapolis, their first race back on a diamond ground surface, the Brickyard 400. They figure it out for Charlotte in the fall, and we sort of are on good terms up until we get to the 2008 season. And then it all starts to fall apart for Goodyear once again. 2008, it means that it is the first season for your friend and mine. Everybody say it with me. The car of tomorrow. Yes, the big old wing on the back of the car. The big, bulky, ugly car of tomorrow. As Tony Stewart will be the first to tell you, Goodyear is struggling to make a good tire for this car.
They exited down to Formula One, they exited down to the IRL, they exited down to CART, they exited down to World Outlaws, and there's a reason for that, because Goodyear can't build a tire that's worth the crap. So if I were Goodyear, I'd be really embarrassed about this weekend and what they brought us here.
Let's look at it like this. The car of tomorrow was birthed out of concerns primarily for safety. Performance was a secondary aspect to this car, if it was even secondary. After the death of Dale Earnhardt in 2001, they got right to work on this car tomorrow. And if safety was the top priority, which it was, this car was very good. If performance was the secondary concern for this car, it was not very good. It was, in fact, I would say almost bad. So along with the diamond grinding, and the weight of these cars, the sheer actual physical weight of them. Those are two of the issues that are going to deploy Goodyear and their quest to make a good tire for this race, unbeknownst to them. The other one would be sort of in line with more performance issues, but the fact that you couldn't actually offset the weight of these cars. Part of what made the Gen 4 cars so easy to handle is that teams were able to shift more weight to the left side of the car. And so when they loaded up on the right side in the corners, the weight would even out. You can't do that in the car tomorrow car anymore. So all of that weight that normally would be transferred from the left to the center is now going from the center to the right. And this bigger, heavier car is putting even more weight than usual on the right side tires. And that is really the big thing that Goodyear is not able to accommodate for some reason. They didn't do an open test for every team like you would normally expect. But what they did was they invited 3 drivers to come and test. They never said who the third was, but I believe 2 of them were Dale Jr. and Jeff Burton. No idea who the third driver was. I couldn't find anything about it. But and apparently no alarm bells sounded because Goodyear, along with all the drivers, were not expecting anything really to be wrong, but let alone as bad as they were. There was not a viable solution once it became apparent that something was very much going wrong. Goodyear just said, well, just keep keep going out there, keep laying rubber down. The tires will just stop wearing out once you get rubber down on the track, which normally works, but it doesn't this time. Why doesn't it work this time? Well, as we now know, because they conducted extensive testing after this race, like something like 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 tire tests at Indianapolis after this, which, yeah, it makes sense. Once you see the scope of everything, it'll make perfect sense if you don't know already. We now know the right rear tire had so much strain on it from an overload of weight. Not only was it not laying rubber down, it was actually legitimately grinding the tire into dust. You could see at one point under caution, they show a shot of it on ESPN. The tire rubber is more looking like flowing water along the outside wall of the track. And if your tire rubber is taking on properties of a liquid, you have made a critical error somewhere down the line. So that should properly set the stage for you, if you will, about what we're about to see here. In the midst of their panic, Goodyear flies in 400 sets of tires that were just sitting at Pocono for the next race on the calendar. And just so we're clear, they don't end up using these tires, but every team will end up using every single set of Indianapolis tires that they were allotted for the course of the weekend. And they say that using every single set will be somewhere in the ballpark of $35,000. 35 grand. Luckily, I guess, the Brickyard 400, like I mentioned earlier, has the highest purse out of any race, including the Daytona 500 at this point. So last place in this race pays about $140,000. I think just a little bit under $140,000. But still, that just cuts a huge swath out of what should be a nice chunk of change for every team who actually gets to start this race. All right, I'm going to shut the hell up about the tires for a while. But let's talk about some of the notable stories that are happening in NASCAR right now. The biggest one is that Tony Stewart has just announced that he will be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of the 2008 season to co-found a new team with Gene Haas, and they're calling it Stewart Haas Racing. It's certainly turned a lot of heads just because of, up to this point, think about it, how many drivers have tried to start their own team that they end up driving for and have completely failed. Up to this point, since I believe 1998, I believe Ricky Rudd was the last owner-driver to win a race. So there are a lot of people concerned that Tony Stewart was going to just fall off this cliff like it happened to so many other drivers like Darrell Waltrip and Bill Elliott, just to think of a couple of notable examples off the top of my head. But he still has 16 races left in the Joe Gibbs Home Depot number 20. He still wants to win another Brickyard 400. He also wants to win another championship for the coach. As we move closer and closer to the chase, which at this point in time is 12 drivers with no wild cards, so it's just the top 12 drivers in points. Tony is down close to the bubble, down in 10th place. Kyle Busch, like I mentioned earlier, is the points leader. He leads by 282 points, which isn't quite as dramatic as it sounds. It's still, at this point, 180 points for a win. So second place driver is only like a race and 3/4 behind Rowdy, which I guess is still pretty impressive. That second place driver is Dale Earnhardt Jr. Yes, I'm not kidding. He is in his first year with Hendrick Motorsports after his tumultuous departure from DEI, his late father's team. Junior says that his top priority is winning the Sprint Cup championship, and honestly, he's done a pretty good job executing up to this point in 2008. He has just 7 finishes all season outside of the top 10. And he grabbed his first win in the 88 car at Michigan a few weeks back, a win that totally would not be his last or anything for the next, 4 seasons. Junior's only question that he has asked in the entire pre-race interview is about his dad, who ESPN, they're just laying it on so heavy for Senior for some reason. They did a whole pre-race package with Richard Childress about Dale Sr. It is like by far the longest thing on the pre-race. Like, I get it because it's Dale, it's the Intimidator. Like, yeah, but like it was 7 years ago. Like, we can probably find something else to give a little bit of airtime to here. Anyways, the lead question in Junior's interview is what it would mean to him to become the second ever father-son duo to both win races at Indianapolis. the other one being the Unsers. And his answer just kind of makes me squirm just a little bit.
What would that mean to you?
We just like to win.
Of course, with it being the Brickyard, Jeff Gordon, a 4-time winner at Indy, and his teammate Jimmy Johnson, the 2-time reigning and defending series champion at this point, and also the winner of the 2006 Brickyard 400. They get some pretty hefty pre-race coverage. The first driver on the outside looking in is Clint Boyer, 13th in the points. He is starting 40th in this race, which certainly wouldn't be ideal if this were going to be a normal race, but it's not going to be. There's so many things that should get some attention in the pre-race, but they just don't. NASCAR is in the beginning stages of what will become their open wheel invasion. Juan Pablo Montoya, second full year on the grid. He has not only raced in F1 around Indy, but of course he won the 2000 Indy 500. So he is expecting big things, as is his car owner, Chip Ganassi, who wants to become the first car owner to win at Indianapolis in both IndyCar and NASCAR. And if he did it with either Juan or his other driver, Reed Sorensen, this year, he would sweep the races at Indy, as Scott Dixon won the Indy 500 earlier in 2008. Other open wheel guys in the field are Sam Hornish Jr., who is only 2 years removed from winning both the Indy 500 and the IRL IndyCar Championship in the same season. AJ Allmendinger driving for Team Red Bull. And Patrick Carpentier, who is driving the Valvoline 10, most fans associate most commonly, I think, with Scott Riggs from around this time. I guess you could also lump guys like Jason Leffler and Robbie Gordon in as well, but I mean, at this point, they're pretty well-established NASCAR talents who have just happened to also have backgrounds in open wheel racing. And one final thing of note for the pre-race is the DNQs. Only 4 drivers who didn't qualify for this race: Stanton Barrett, Johnny Sauter, Tony Raines, and frickin' $1 million Bill. Oh my gosh, he has started every single Brickyard 400 up to this point. He qualifies 40th on raw pace alone, but he is out-qualified by Terry Labonte, and thus the one and only Champions Provisional, because that's still a thing at this point. The one and only Champions Provisional goes to Terry, and Bill Elliott, driving for the Wood Brothers, has to pack up and leave Indy. Bill wouldn't even attempt to qualify for another Brickyard 400 after this, so that was the last hurrah for Bill Elliott. This is also the most recent DNQ, I would venture to say probably the last DNQ on pace alone for the Wood Brothers. They did have 3 DNQs, oddly enough, with Ryan Blaney in 2015, but those were all because they weren't in the top 36 in owner points in qualifying and rained out. So, last DNQ for the Wood Brothers on pace alone came here at the 2008 Brickyard 400, and it cost $1 million Bill a shot at his last Brickyard 400. It is now time for opening ceremonies, and this packed house gets up to their feet for a moment of silence for Steve Peterson, who was a longtime NASCAR official who helped usher in both the Hans device and safer barriers into the sport, undoubtedly saving numerous lives through the years. He passed away unexpectedly at his home the week prior to this race. During the moment of silence, someone must have thought that there was too much talking going on. We get cars rolling off the grid. They show a graphic that illustrates how everyone who has won the Brickyard 400 up to this point, save for Ricky Rudd and Kevin Harvick, are Cup Series champions. Of course, Kevin Harvick would eventually go on to become a Cup Series champion. It sort of goes to show what it takes to get it done here at Indy in a normal race. Of course, today was not going to be normal. It was going to be much tougher than anybody was hoping for. As mentioned, Dr. Jerry Punch anchors the actual broadcast, flanked by the usual suspects for NASCAR on ESPN, future Hall of Fame driver Dale Jarrett, and championship-winning crew chief Andy Petrie. Dale interviews in-race reporter Tony Stewart, and Tony says that it will not be the fastest car that wins the race today. He's technically going to be wrong, but I get what he's trying to say. So as this graphic comes up on screen, you just love to see it, the question marks in place of where the laps go. A reminder that not a single person in practice was able to run more than 10 laps on a single set of tires. So NASCAR has said that there will be at least 2 competition cautions that will come out after 2 respective stints of 10 green flag laps each, after which they will evaluate how tire wear is improving and decide on what their next move is from there. As we now know, the tire wear situation will not improve over the course of this race, not even a little bit. So just buckle in. I spent a lot of time covering a bunch of stuff before we got to this race, and that's because I'm going to try and abridge the events of this race down as much as possible because, quite frankly, this race is a goddamn chore to sit through, and I've done it 3 times now. I'm tired of it. We are green for 160 laps at Indianapolis, 400 miles, with pole sitter Jimmy Johnson and outside pole sitter Mark Martin leading the charge to turn number 1. Johnson pulls ahead, and he really doesn't face any sort of threat at all for the lead. Everything seems like it's going to be okay for the first lap or so. And then when we get to the backstretch on lap 2, Montoya, Sadler, Kurt Busch, and Edwards go 4 wide for some godforsaken reason, with Edwards simultaneously blocking Dale Jr. all the way down to the grass. Lap 4 is where we see our first caution, 6 laps before the competition caution. And it is for Michael Waltrip, who has blown a right rear tire. Paul Menard, driving Waltrip's old 15 car, gets a piece of it as he goes by. And then I'm assuming my then would-be 10-year-old broadcast partner, Matt Williamson, is found crying in a cornfield in Illinois somewhere because his favorite driver just got taken out of the race. So I hope you've recovered, Matt. Unaware of how much tire wear they are actually suffering at the current moment, the majority of the field elects to stay out since they only ran 3.5 laps under green. Some of them will come to regret this, of course. The competition caution will now be pushed back to lap 14, and we restart the race on lap 9. So the drivers that didn't pit need to make it 5 laps under green before the competition caution comes out. Jimmy Johnson pulls away again on this restart, but we're going to go ahead and skip ahead to lap 12, where David Rudiman, driving Dale Jarrett's old UPS 44 for Michael Waltrip Racing, runs out a right rear tire and slaps the wall. The next time around, in that same vicinity, Kurt Busch blows a right rear tire and collects Kevin Harvick. And the caution comes out for incident again before we get to the competition caution. Because of this, Clint Boyer, without moving too much up through the field, is going to move himself into the top 12 in the points. And that bumps Kevin Harvick out of the chase. And I think it's worth noting that despite being in the middle of what will eventually become a 3.5 season long winless streak, Kevin does actually kind of go on a little bit of a tear after this. Not only does he work his way back up into the chase, but he will only finish outside of the top 10 3 more times for the rest of the season and will finish 4th in the points. So I'd say Kevin Harvick sort of got it together after getting taken out here. This time we're going to get everybody onto pit road, including the majority of the drivers who had come in under the previous caution. Top 5 off of pit road will only take right side tires, which actually is fine. And not being facetious about that at all. It's only the right side tires that are having these problems, so not changing the left side tires frequently or more frequently than you would in a normal race will actually work out just fine. 2 drivers stayed out under that caution. Dale Jr. is now the leader, and now I get to talk about, for the second roundup in a row, the late great Jason Leffler. He is driving a Hunt Brothers Pizza sponsored number 70 car. This 70 was earmarked to be the ride for the 2008 season for the newly reinstated Jeremy Mayfield. He ran the first 7 races in the car in 2008 and dropped out of the top 35 in owner points. So he was subsequently let go, of course, due to his poor performance. So they had a number of drivers bounce in and out of that 70 car, 7 different drivers, in fact, and to try and make sure that it had a healthy amount of owner points heading into 2009. And the reason they wanted a healthy amount of owner points for that car heading into 2009 is because this car is owned by Gene Haas. Yeah, that's right. This 70 car is going to be Tony Stewart's car in 2009. To me, that is just hilarious to think about. Anyways, also further bloviating about things that don't matter at all, it is at this point that I realized in 2008 that NASCAR is still using single file restarts. Double file restarts, for the record, don't get implemented until about halfway through the 2009 season. Alrighty, we're back on track now, literally, as all but the 2 drivers that are up front have just pit for tires. Watch poor Jason Leffler drop like a rock through the field here on the restart as Junior attempts to pull away. A rarity is about to occur here as Jimmy Johnson gets passed by Jeff Gordon for the second position. Things settle down for a couple of laps until we get to lap 22 when Casey Kane gets a diagnosis from his crew chief, Kenny Francis, that he has a cracked exhaust header on that car. and they have to make sure that they watch it to make sure he doesn't melt any of the spark plug wires throughout the course of the race. We go to commercial on lap 23. You can see the gap between Gordon and Junior closing rapidly for the top spot. We come back from break, and Junior immediately has a problem. He has corded the right rear tire and is moments away from disaster. He has to pit under green. After this, NASCAR miraculously announces that they are moving the competition caution to lap 30. As Mike Massaro is interviewing Kurt Busch in the garage, we will see what will be, in my opinion, the only exciting part about this entire race, which is drivers pitting before the competition caution to try and get some track position. It is as close as you could get to gambling on strategy without the potential for injury, if you will. Mark Martin heads for pit road 2 laps before the caution is scheduled to fly, but as he is leaving his stall, Juan Montoya has a right rear tire actually blow out on him, tossing some debris on the track, necessitating another early caution. So nobody outside of Mark Martin, who is doing a little bit of trolling, a little bit of strategy, is going to stay out here. After the pit stops, we cut to Tony Stewart for an in-race report, and he says trying to move through the field is like robbing Peter to pay Paul. And it is the most eloquent way he would ever even attempt to criticize Goodyear. With everybody coming in after the second scheduled competition caution, the alarm bells are starting to sound because, shocker, tire wear did not improve, not even marginally. Mike Massaro gets down close and gives us our very first look on the broadcast at a right rear tire. That tire came off of Jeff Gordon's car. That's the guy who was leading the race. That is a scary thought. New leader on the restart is points leader, Kyle Busch. It doesn't take but 2 laps for Kyle Busch to regret pushing so hard on the restart, and he starts to slow up big time, letting Jimmy and Jeff go right on by at the Yard of Bricks to get back out front. NASCAR then announces that the next competition caution will be on lap 47, which will be 18 laps from green to yellow. Spoiler alert, we're not going to make it that far. Junior was a lap down after coming in to get his tire problem sorted out, but he pushes right on past teammate Jeff Gordon anyway. Lap 46, Mark Martin, keeping with his strategy to come in before the caution. And just like last time, the caution flies on his outlap. Matt Kenseth really blows out the right rear tire and really tears up the right side of that car. Matt tried to come in a couple of laps earlier, but his crew didn't respond to him when he asked to come into pit. It seems like this would be the one race that you would actually kind of want to be listening to your driver, but that's just me, I guess. On the pit stops, a lot of drivers who have only taken 4 tires up to this point decide to take 2, and it's the reverse for the 2 tire takers the last few cautions. So this kind of jumbles the field up, but it's Kyle Busch leading AJ Allmendinger, Jeff Burton, and Elliott Sadler off of pit road. This caution period is really drawn out now as everyone is in on what is happening. These tires are not getting better. They're not going to get better. The poor Goodyear competition director has got to be feeling like target practice walking up and down Gasoline Alley this weekend. There are abundant shots now from the ESPN cameras of overly worn and corded right rear tires. We cut to Matt Kenseth in the garage, and he is using some strong Wisconsin language.
It's a really disappointing situation. You know, this is one of the 2 biggest races of the year, and to never have this car here before, not come into an open test and work on these things and work on the tires is pretty darn disappointing.
And here we go. Rinse and repeat for this green flag cycle. Restart on lap 54. We're going to have a competition caution on lap 64. It's single file. The only 2 drivers that are able to push through the tire issues somehow are Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon. Jimmy will take the lead back from Kyle Busch on lap 62. The pace that Kyle sets early will come back to bite him again here as he looks to have another right rear tire issue, this time on lap 64, right before the caution comes out. He drops from 2nd all the way down to 9th before NASCAR decides to finally throw a caution on lap 65, not on lap 64. Off of pit road, AJ Allmendinger is the first to get to the line. I think it's worth mentioning how funky AJ's time at Team Red Bull is. AJ, of course, is one of the drivers to move to NASCAR after a fairly notable, I'd say, open-wheel career, dating back to Team Red Bull's formation in 2006 when they inexplicably attempted 3 races in a Dodge because Toyota wasn't in the sport yet. The Dinger failed to qualify for 6 straight races. He finally starts a few races in 2007, but doesn't have a ton of success. And then once we start the 2008 season, he does the exact same thing. He fails to qualify for the first 3 races of the 2008 season. he's actually going to get bounced from Team Red Bull by Mike Skinner, who is retired at this point. And then once Talladega rolls around, Mike, I guess, says, I don't want to do it anymore. AJ comes back into that 84, and he starts to qualify for more races. Actually, he doesn't fail to qualify again for another race. And the results, with some time on track, actually start to improve now for AJ. He has a couple of finishes just outside of the top 10. But this is the strongest by far that he has looked in this car up to this point. Greg Stucker is the aforementioned Goodyear competition director. He gets some airtime here. Restart on lap 71. Lap car is Jason Leffler. He scoots by the Dinger, who is the race leader, at least for the next couple of laps until Jimmy decides to get on it. The other Red Bull car, piloted by Brian Vickers, hits pit road on lap 74, which is pretty early even for a tire issue. Now in last week's Roundup, Vickers, driving the Aaron's Dream Machine, blew his motor on the first lap. They didn't catch it on camera, so I didn't mention it. This time, though, it is another motor problem, rather, for Vickers. So I will mention it this time because it's on air. And I encourage you only from here on out to recommend me races where something bad happens to Brian Vickers, because I'm all here for it. Lap 80, and the biggest thing to happen here is that Jimmy Johnson almost touches the wall. Oh no. Lap 82, Martin Truex Jr. pits, keeping with his teammate Mark Martin's strategy of pitting a few laps before the competition caution. Lap 84, competition caution. Here come the pit stops. Carl Edwards this time is going to win the race off of pit road. Under this caution, we get the president of NASCAR himself, Mike Helton, into the ESPN booth, which is truly indicative of how big this problem is. He says, we've had more competition cautions today than we were hoping to have, and you can go ahead and put that in the no shit Hall of Fame right there. We restart with only 74 laps to go. Mercifully, we are over halfway through this circus. Truex and Edwards get away from Greg Biffle, who gets a horrible restart. Truex does not make it very far, being in the lead, as there goes Edwards to the point. He's out front for 3 laps until, surprise, surprise, here comes Jimmy and Jeff to pass cousin Carl. They announced the next competition caution and also announced that they have started to close the pits 4 laps before the competition caution. In order to stop the strategy plays, which were the only interesting thing about this fucking race. And not only that, this really fucks over Bobby Labonte too, who legitimately has a flat tire that he needs to come get fixed. And I know it's sort of NASCAR protecting teams from themselves, but I say if they want to do it at this point, just let them do it. It's not going to make anything any worse. There's no point in punishing drivers for trying to do literally anything different to mix up their race and control their own fate, because God forbid we provide them with any favorable circumstances on July 27th, 2008. But oh well. The caution comes out. This time it's Elliott Sadler taking 2 and leading the field off of pit road. NASCAR really takes their time here cleaning the top sides of the turns, and we finally get back under green with 55 laps to go. Sadler does not make it to the south chute with the lead as Burton and Allmendinger storm by on the inside. I mentioned Vickers' motor going sour on him earlier. Well, it finally decides to do what Jeffrey Epstein didn't do and finish itself off, and it brings out another caution. God, this is a cry for help. Please don't make me do shitty races anymore. I know I did this one to myself, but I'm saying in the future, don't make me do shitty races, please. We are getting ready to come to a restart with 49 laps to go, but we get an all-time hilarious and ironic sponsor read here.
That's what the crew chiefs are saying too, Alan. We just don't know. Aerial coverage from high above this racetrack brought us to you by the good friends at Goodyear for track-tested technology. Get there on Goodyear Innovation.
Top 3 are Jefferson, Burton, AJ Allmendinger, and Jimmy Johnson. Johnson goes up into second in turn 4, but AJ fights back and takes the spot back into turn 1. Nice work, Dinger. Oh, but too soon. Jimmy fights back and will take the spot back outright, and the ensuing fight also costs AJ 3rd and 4th. He loses those spots to Elliott Sadler and Jeff Gordon. 45 to go. Jimmy is back out front as the Prilosec OTC 31 car of Jeff Burton moves back to second. They come back from a commercial, and Burton has given up second to Gordon. Jeff on Jeff violence for you there. Getting ready for the next wave of pit stops. A few teams that have dropped out of the race are starting to give away their extra tire sets, and teams are apparently fighting over them like unwed women over a wedding bouquet. 39 laps to go. The competition caution is going to fly just as Cousin Carl goes underneath of Jeff Gordon for second. This time, Denny Hamlin is going to win the race off of pit road. Johnson out second. J.J. Yaley in the Hall of Fame Racing 96 jumps up 12 spots. And this might be a record here. I don't know. I don't have any way of checking it. But Kevin Harvick is going to get the lucky dog here. He is 15 laps down. 33 laps to go. Denny Hamlin waits a good long while to bring the field up to speed. The next caution will be with 22 laps to go. Here is an actual first in this race. Denny Hamlin is actually holding off and pulling away from Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy actually backs up to Carl Edwards right up against the competition caution, but he ends up holding off the 99 until the yellow flag flies. Top 8 cars off of pit road all take 2 tires, meaning that Jimmy Johnson is all the way back to 9th, but with 4 fresh tires. On the broadcast, they're stacking the deck against Jimmy Johnson, and every fan from around this time knows exactly what that means and exactly what is about to happen. 19 laps to go, 9 laps until the final scheduled caution of the race. Jimmy Johnson passes Jamie McMurray on the outside heading into the South Chute. He's trying to pass Casey Kane out of 4, and he makes a wild block on Carl Edwards, nearly clipping the pit road entry cone on his way by. As Johnson and Edwards pick people off left and right, Denny Hamlin, the leader, appears to have picked up a Coors Light can on the front of the grill. It's hard to make out exactly what it is since this broadcast is recorded in such stunning high quality. As Jimmy and Carl are passing Jeff Burton, the caution comes out. They are both clearly ahead of the 31 car. But apparently at the last loop, Jimmy was ahead of Burton, but Carl wasn't. So that kind of sucks, but whatever. All right, the only moment of genuine tension and excitement of the entire race. This is the most important pit stop of the day. The Lowe's crew absolutely deliver. They're way out ahead of Edwards. Hamlin comes in as the leader. They had a crew member get hit with a flying tire that came out of their hands when Reed Sorensen went by and pulled into his pit box. So that holds up his stop quite a bit. He is going to pay for it. Alrighty, here we go. It's the finish. I mean, everybody's going to go balls out here. It's 8 laps to go. They're going 3 wide outside of the top 10. Jimmy and Carl, they're pulling away, but we knew that they were going to do that. And Jimmy, heading down the back straightaway, tries to do the snake move like you see in the Indy cars down the backstretch to break the toe, and it works. For the next 7 laps, Carl just stays about a car length and a half behind Jimmy, never gets any closer, and that's it. That's it. Jimmy Johnson wins his second Brickyard 400. He's only the second driver in history to win the race from the pole. It's his 35th win of his career up to this point. God, mercifully, this one is over. It's a career best 10th place finish for AJ Allmendinger, who after finally getting the ball rolling with Team Red Bull and putting some good finishes together, he decides to leave the team mid-season. And then he goes to replace Patrick Carpentier for Evernham in the 10 car for the final few races of the season. This race sort of breaks up the momentum that Kyle Busch had. He wins one more race in 2008. But when it comes time for the chase, he has a few DNFs and only 2 top 5 finishes in the final 10 races of the season. He falls all the way down to P10 in the point standings after coming into the chase as the top seed. So really crappy finish to what was a really strong opener for Kyle Busch in 2008. On a similar note to that, Dale Jr., who leaves this race second in the points, mind you, will only have 4 more top 10s of the entire season. He finishes 12th out of 12 in the chase. Our top 2 finishers today really carry the banner forward in the 2008 season. Jimmy Johnson, like he always does, gets hot around the chase, wins 3 of the last 10 races of the season. He does finish 2 of the last 3 races in 15th, the 15th position, which in theory opens the door for Carl Edwards to walk away with the championship if it weren't for 2 consecutive DNFs early in the chase at Talladega and Charlotte back-to-back. Other than those 2 finishes, Carl's worst finish for the other 8 races is 4th. He finishes every single other race in the top 5. He was absolutely electric. It would be the closest he would come to winning the title until 2011, which I will get back to here momentarily. Let's not beat around the bush here. This race sucked mega ass. The megaest ass you've ever seen. Put a straw in it and suck it. This was bad. This was that bad. It's easily the worst race of the modern era of NASCAR. Up there, top 3, top 5 worst NASCAR races of all time. Can't get over it. For the rating system here, this is not good. Can I just say it's not good? Do I actually have to go through all this? The racing quality here, a very generous 2 out of 10. There were a couple of good blocks and passes, but 30% of this race was run under the goddamn caution. The finish is an incredibly generous 1 out of 10. Complete snooze fest. Memorability, based on the criteria that I said at Watkins Glen last time, big fat 0 out of 10, which I don't really want to do going forward because that's not a valid score. But yeah, a big fat 0 out of 10. Absolutely nothing is celebrated about this race other than the fact that the checkered flag came out after 160 laps and everybody could get on with their life. Now, let's look at historical significance. It is interesting. Take a look at what happened to NASCAR at Indianapolis after this race. The biggest non-pandemic related percentage drop in attendance of any event in NASCAR history occurs for the Brickyard 400 between 2008 and 2009. In 2009, there were less than 200,000 people there. Over 50,000 people didn't show up again. Now, is that exclusively the fault of this particular clown show? I'm going to say no. I mean, for one, from 2008 to 2009, the global economy just kind of does this little bitty implode sort of thing, that you see like once in a generation, even though it's happened like 3 times since then. But that's all right. That's politics. I don't want to get into that here. Also, NASCAR as a whole at this point is on the decline. Like, we know that it's pretty rapid descent into mediocrity and obscurity. Happens right around this point in time. And that's just a whole nother can of worms I don't want to get into here. Also, around this time, IMS lifted their broadcast blackout ban from, I believe it's like 160-mile radius around the track. That's a freaking huge blackout ban I never realized was in place. So, rather than sitting out in the late July sun baking at this track that really doesn't have very good sight lines to watch a NASCAR race and where they really just pissed you off last year, I'm sure a good bulk of people probably elected just to stay home and probably enjoy the race just as much. I hate to say it. This fiasco, of course, it compounds the issue. It does. It does make it worse. Very much intended there. It compounds the issue. And as we now know, at least at the time of recording, NASCAR has completely abandoned racing on this oval altogether in favor of using the road course and junking everybody's shit that way. For one, I cannot wait for them to decide to go back to the oval. It is the most prestigious oval. It's not NASCAR that made it that way, but it's the most famous oval on Earth. NASCAR is the most famous oval series on Earth. Indianapolis 500 is the most famous oval race, but NASCAR is the most famous oval series. They should absolutely be on the most famous oval. The road course is good for IndyCar. The road course for NASCAR is an absolute farce. I don't care how much the oval has not produced the most consistently great racing. It's the Indianapolis Oval. NASCAR needs to be on it. And that is my genuine opinion there. So in terms of historical significance, technically it should be getting a negative score because it does have a negative connotation to it. But I will give it a 4 out of 10 because it does have some amount of an impact. That is for future historians to decide how much. That gives us a grand total of a possible 40. That gives us a 7. A 7 out of 40. That is an incredibly low bar. I hope to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ of Nazareth that we never have to limbo under a score of 7 out of 40. That is so bad. And this was bad. I did it to myself. I can't even be mad at you because I made myself do it. But this was awful, and I hated every second of it. This will be a quick off here. I'm just as tired of doing this as you are, I think, listening. But if you've made it this far, thank you very much. I do genuinely hope you've enjoyed my suffering here today. Next week, we're going back in the right direction. Or we're covering what I teased a little bit earlier. We're covering the chase for the 2011 Sprint Cup Series Championship. It will be Stewart versus Edwards in the Ford 400 at Homestead Miami Speedway. Be sure to tune in here next time on Turn 200. Be sure to hit like and subscribe on your way out. Until we meet again, I'm Tommy Cook. We'll see you in the next one. It's over. It's over. Yeah!